Minnesota may have given an ultimatum to Karl Anthony-Towns and this current Minnesota Timberwolves team. And this could be good news for the Knicks, especially if you're a fan of the Knicks trading for Karl Anthony-Towns. According to one NBA insider with Hoops Hype, he actually reports that the New York Knicks actually value Karl Anthony-Towns' massive contract, and that the Timberwolves may have given Karl Anthony-Towns an ultimatum for the playoffs this year. We're going to break down all of this and so much more today. So be sure you're subscribed to the channel and have notifications turned on so you don't miss a second of the new content. And now, let's get started. An NBA insider with Hoops Hype provides an update on KAT's status with Minnesota. Now, it feels like each and every week we see another KAT article come out, either linking him to the Knicks or explaining why the Knicks are likely going to trade for him at some point in time. And now another NBA insider in Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, somebody who I've had on my show personally, he's now actually reporting that the Knicks are still interested in Karl Anthony-Towns, but the bigger thing that he reported here is that the Minnesota Timberwolves may have given Towns and this current Timberwolves team an ultimatum for the playoffs. According to Michael Scotto, he states the following: the consensus among the NBA executives who spoke to Hoops Hype is that if Minnesota loses in the first round of the playoffs for the third straight year, Towns could be the most likely member of the core traded. The executive based this assertion on several factors. One of the main ones clearly here stated is that Anthony Edwards emerged as the face of the franchise. Not to mention that Michael Scotto also, who spoke to rival executives when was asked about the Minnesota situation, basically stated that a lot of people had concerns about how long they can keep the team together long term, given the looming luxury tax concerns. Shout out to Michael Scotto from Hoops Hype for providing this information and giving us this massive update. It is important to note that he mentioned that the Minnesota Timberwolves, if they don't get the result as they want from the playoffs this year, from the trio that they have with Towns, Edwards, and Gobert, absolutely, something is going to happen. A change is going to occur, and it's likely going to be Towns looking like he's going to get traded. He's going to start that SUPERMAX next year as well, too. So it does make sense for the Timberwolves, if they feel like this core is not going to do anything significant, to trade Karl Anthony-Towns to some other team. And the fact of the matter is, Michael Scotto from Hoops Hype actually mentioned that the New York Knicks would value Towns' contract. Per Scotto, the executives also pointed to the New York Knicks as a team with enough young assets and draft picks to get a deal done, and a willingness to value Towns' massive contract extension going forward. Did you catch that part? A willingness to accept his contract moving forward. You know, his SUPERMAX contract that gets larger and larger and larger each and every year. That contract, it is exceptionally crazy to me to hear this report from Michael Scotto, to hear that the Knicks would actually value this SUPERMAX contract with Karl Anthony-Towns. Now, I have no idea why they would value such a contract, but what I will say is one thing. The good news for the Knicks and fans who don't want a trade to happen for Towns is that Minnesota is looking like one of the best teams in the NBA. Their defense is sensational. Gobert looks great. Edwards looks like a mini MJ. And Karl Anthony-Towns, say what you want to say about him, but honestly, he looks very good this season. Even though he had a slow start to the season, he's overcome that, and he's put up some incredible numbers. So all of them are doing very good. The Minnesota Timberwolves have high expectations this year because clearly, as Scotto stated here, if Minnesota loses in the first round of the playoffs for the third straight year, Towns could be the most likely member of the core traded. That is significant to note. That means Minnesota is expecting greatness this year. They want to go further and further and further. And if they don't, Something is going to happen. A change is going to happen. And that might be good news for the Knicks because apparently they love Towns' contract. They don't mind it. So since that's the case, they are probably hoping that the Timberwolves spiral out of control because that could mean that Towns becomes available and the Knicks could potentially swoop in, get Towns, and get that star that they've been looking for so many years. Even though I argue that the star you do not want to trade for is Karl Anthony-Towns. Talk about a person that does not move the needle. Three-point shooter, yes. One of the best three-point shooters for his size, yes. Is he a good defender? No. Can he play good post-game? No. Do you need another piece? Another significant piece, I add you, to this Knicks team if you add Karl Anthony-Towns? Yes. And do you have less assets now to do it because you made this move? Yes. So how are you making the move? He has a Supermax deal as well too. You got to pay a lot of players. How are you adding more talent? I do not want Karl Anthony-Towns on this team. I've made that known not only in this video, but in a number of videos on the channel already. If you haven't seen those videos, I urge you, go to the channel, type in Karl Anthony-Towns or Cat, watch the videos appear, and watch all of them. My point has been consistent throughout. He doesn't move the needle. He gets paid like a superstar and does not play like one. He doesn't show up in the playoffs. And if you want to trade for another player that doesn't show up in the playoffs and give up significant assets to do it, I question the leadership and the decisions that are being made because it does not make any sense at all to me. Michael Scotto also reported that while the Knicks were linked to Timberwolves forward Karl Anthony-Towns earlier in the season, there are several factors that make a trade difficult at this time and potentially through the trade deadline. First, Minnesota is rolling as one of the top teams in the West and doesn't want to break up a good thing. Second, while Quickly has fans in Minnesota, the same cannot be said for Julius Randle. Mitchell Robinson also is an ideal trade candidate for Minnesota with Rudy Gobert entrenched at center. It's also unclear where Minnesota stands on RJ Barrett. Michael Scotto's report here definitely is bad news for a lot of Cat fans, but if you're somebody like me, you are doing a dance right now because of course Minnesota is rolling right now. There's no reason for them to break up a good thing. So that's great. But another thing is Minnesota doesn't really seem interested in anything that the New York Knicks have. Julius Randle? Nope, they don't want him. Emmanuel Quickly, arguably the Knicks' best trade asset right behind Jalen Brunson? They don't want him either. They don't want Mitchell Robinson. They don't want some key pieces on the Knicks. We have no idea how they feel about RJ Barrett, and I would say that the New York Knicks, given how RJ Barrett has looked, would not even consider trading RJ Barrett at this stage. So if RJ Barrett's not on the table, they don't want Mitchell Robinson. They don't want Julius Randle. They don't want Emmanuel Quickly. Is a trade going to happen? I don't think so. So again, that's also great to hear. Minnesota wants no assets from the Knicks, so that means a trade can't really happen from a star player like Karl Anthony-Towns. So that's good to hear for me because I don't want Towns on this team. I've said it once and I'll say it 1,000 times if I have to. He does not move the needle and he does not do enough for this Knicks team. If anything, he gives you less assets to go out and make another move because you're going to need to make another move to pair with Towns and Brunson in order to push this Knicks team past the hump. Don't get that twisted. That doesn't change. But something else to note that Michael Scotto stated here is that Minnesota rolling as one of the top teams in the West is not even considering trying to make a move for one of their core big three right now. So that's also good for me to hear. That means Minnesota is not going to be somebody that the Knicks are going to target and trade with mid-season. So that means, and it supports the whole theory, that the New York Knicks are likely going to be trade partners in the offseason, not now. So since that's the case, I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see what happens because that major acquisition, that major star player that everybody wants to see the Knicks get, is only going to happen during the offseason. I don't believe a significant trade happens during the middle of the season. However, I will say That doesn't mean that they won't trade for a smaller player, like in terms of a role player, maybe a Bodan Bogdanovic. Maybe they trade for him. Again, role players that are significant are not off the table. I do see the Knicks making some type of move like that because they have to use Evan Fournier's contract to some degree at this point. So I do believe they're going to get a role player like Boban and get him on the team and hopefully upgrade what this New York Knicks team can do in terms of shooting. But that's probably the only upgrade I see the Knicks making in terms of a during the season type of trade. The major trade that everybody wants to see happens during this offseason. And this report from Michael Scotto basically supports it because Minnesota is not going to make a decision on Towns and separating that core until they see what they do in the playoffs. So because of that, we know the likeliest move is going to happen during this next offseason. So let's cross Towns off the list. He doesn't have to be on the list anymore. Minnesota's going to wait. The Knicks are clearly waiting and watching. And for me, I'm waiting and I'm a little bit scared because I do not want the Knicks to trade for Karl Anthony-Towns. But unfortunately, his name is always going to be linked to the Knicks. And as long as Leon Rose is president of the Knicks, he is always going to be a candidate for a trade target for the Knicks. But what about you guys? What do you think about all of this? Do you think that the New York Knicks should even entertain a Karl Anthony-Towns trade? Should the Knicks even be looking into this trade as heavily as they are? And is Karl Anthony-Towns a mover of the needle? Or do you agree with me? And do you believe if you add Karl Anthony-Towns to this team, he will not push this team to the next level, as a lot of different fans and other players and other NBA league sources believe he'll do? Let me know in the comments below, guys, because honestly, I would love to hear from you. But that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, go ahead and smash that like button, leave a comment below. And of course, guys, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Knicks fans. Peace.